Hi guys, welcome to Dreamy Writing Academy. I am Heather Griffin, the tutor of Dreamy Writing courses. Last week we discussed how to introduce characters in the beginning to make them more impressive. And today we're going to talk about another important part of getting a story started: conflict. Happy stories and characters are usually boring when readers get into the first chapter of your story. If your characters are living ordinary lives with little changes and without any difficulties or conflicts, they're not likely to continue reading. A good story must introduce conflict at the beginning, and the more stresses and changes the characters are faced with, the more intriguing the account will be. Although your story may eventually come to a happy ending, the road to happiness must be full of conflicts. Among these conflicts, the first incidents are particularly critical. A good opening conflict serves as a hook, in the same way that a baited hook at the end of a fishing line catches fish, let's say. A good literary hook catches the reader's attention and holds it. So, how do you write qualified conflicts at the beginning of a story? Well, today I'm going to share some tips and some ideas with you on this topic. Number 1, about conflict. 1.1, what is a conflict? Conflict is a word that we often hear when writing. A conflict is a triggering event, a difficulty, or a threat the characters have to face. Think of a conflict like a stone that has been thrown into a lake. Its important role is to disturb the homeostasis between the protagonists and their environment. 1.2, background of the conflict. As a general rule, a conflict's background should be as vivid as possible without being too wordy, and it should reveal the character's life prior to the conflict and show a contrast between it and the situation they are currently facing. For example, in the werewolf story, Emily, that we discussed before, the first conflict that Emily encountered was her failure to transform into a werewolf. The conflict's background? Every werewolf has to transform at the coming-of-age ceremony. If they don't transform, then they will not be recognized by their wolf pack. Thus, when Emily fails to transform, readers can easily understand her dilemma, and they will have empathy for her. 1.2, changes from the conflict. Generally, a conflict will result in a change in character, in appearance, emotion, disposition, or social relations, a change in the plot, in the rhythm of the story, and the narrative perspective. Okay, after learning some concepts and knowledge of conflict, you should have an idea of conflict, and we will continue to delve into other aspects of conflict. Number 2, types of conflict. 2.1, let's look at conflicts divided by involving parts. Conflicts between characters. The most typical is the good versus evil scenario. The two parties are opposed because of different interests, concepts, feelings, and other things, which lead to confrontations, in language maybe, physically, or just in life. Conflicts between characters and their external environment. Now, this is when people suddenly enter a strange environment. There is a natural process that includes running in and adaptation. Throughout this process, there are usually conflicts between the characters and their surroundings. These often arise from different customs and different social rules. Such conflicts often occur in werewolf stories and fantasy stories when protagonists travel through uncharted territories. Conflicts between characters and their inner thoughts and urges. The disposition of a good character or protagonist will develop and will change. The tracked changes are called the character's arc. Before a character arc is complete, the protagonist must fight their inner demons and overcome some of their shortcomings. These faults might include arrogance, timidity, or ruthlessness. When faced with a series of events, a character has to overcome the conflict with the outside world, or other characters, let's say, or external environment, and their personal, inner shortcomings. To be considered successful, a character must have battled and defeated their inner demons. 2.2, let's look at conflicts divided by origination. Relationship conflict, love versus hostility, stable relationship versus a broken relationship, loyalty versus betrayal, a mate versus refusal, true love versus contract marriage or family marriage. Family conflict, complete family versus a broken family, recognized or legitimate child versus an unrecognized or illegitimate child, a wife versus a secret lover, harmony or care versus abuse or injury, rich versus poor. And let's look at some tips about conflict designing. Let's take a look at an example of how to apply these tips to your writing. Number 3, an example to design conflicts at the beginning. Based on the introduction to conflict, let's take a look at the start of Emily. Emily and her good friend Ani were quietly talking about the boys that were present at the ball. They both hoped that their future mates would be present. Ani had finished her adult ceremony the previous week and had not found her mate yet. Emily was very excited about her adult ceremony, and she was praying that her mate would soon appear. Emily's father, James, gave a speech and thanked everyone for coming. Everyone stopped dancing and surrounded Emily in preparation for the adult ceremony. Unfortunately, Emily failed. She could not transform. The wolf inside her body did not respond to her at all. Camille had always been jealous of Emily, so she said that Emily's failure proved that the moon goddess had abandoned her. Thus, she said that Emily should not be allowed to live with the wolf pack anymore. Emily's elder brother, Herman, argued with Camille, but Emily saw the disappointment in the eyes of her parents and the eyes of the people around her. Finally, with a heart filled with sorrow, she left the ball. Now, in these introductory paragraphs, we can see the following conflicts. Conflicts between the protagonist and her external environment. To be an accepted member of the Moon Pack, every member needed to transform at the adult ceremony. Thus, Emily's failure to change created a conflict between her and the wolf pack. Conflicts between characters. Camille envied Emily, so she spread rumors about her, which created a conflict between her and Emily. And conflicts between the character and her inner self. Because Emily failed to transform, she was no longer a carefree little girl. After leaving the wolves, she had to face all kinds of difficulties, and these difficulties would test her character. Family conflict. Initially, Emily was part of a happy family, but after she failed to transform, her parents were disappointed in her, and her previously happy life was gone. Here's what happens next. Emily met Sam at the ball. Sam was from the biggest wolf pack in the north. He was young, good-looking, and the target of all the girls' attention. As Emily struggled to find her mate, Sam rushed over. The wolves in their bodies confirmed that they were each other's mates. But Sam refused Emily, which made her extremely sad. Here we see a classic version of a relationship conflict. Emily finds her mate, but he rejects her. The love story between Emily and Sam begins with this conflict, and the process of resolving this conflict will include them falling in love. Now that we understand the concepts and types of conflicts, we need to think about how to present them. Although some conflicts are in the same type, they could give readers quite different feelings when presented in different ways. It is important to choose a good expression. Number 4, the way conflicts are presented. 4.1, dialogue and action. The vast majority of conflicts can be presented in two ways, through dialogue and action. The term dialogue refers to conversations between characters facing conflict. Dialogue is the most direct way to present conflict. A wonderfully concise discussion can present the background and process the conflict and the emotional atmosphere. If it is done well, a dialogue will compel readers to continue reading. The term action refers to the behavior of characters, both conscious and subconscious. Now let's look at an example from Emily's story. Dialogue. Emily's father, James, gave a speech and thanked everyone for coming. Action. Everybody stopped dancing and surrounded Emily in preparation for the adult ceremony. Unfortunately, Emily failed. She could not transform. The wolf inside her body did not respond to her at all. Here, both the dialogue and the action demonstrate the conflicts Emily was facing. There are some points to pay attention to when you are determining the way to present conflicts. The conflicts in the opening scenes should not be excessive in length. It is necessary to build suspense in the opening chapters. Although conflicts attract readers' attention, too many conflicts at the beginning of the story would confuse readers. In general, it's recommended to introduce 2 or 3 conflicts in the first 3 chapters. 4.2, family and relationship. 2 common introductory conflicts are family conflicts and relationship conflicts. Family conflicts allow protagonists to walk away from their childhood, be independent, and face the changes and challenges that come with being an adult. Relationship conflicts force protagonists to face betrayal, injury, and helplessness, while pushing them to mature and pave the way for a happy ending. The conflicts in the opening scenes are generally small. Their important role is to disturb the homeostasis between the protagonists and their environment and force them to confront new choices. The conflicts in the opening scenes should not be too big, but they must create the kind of suspense that will trigger more conflicts in the following chapters. For example, in the werewolf story Emily, Sam's rejection of Emily triggers many of the events that follow after the ceremony. Sam and Emily eventually become mates, and readers will be interested in how they meet again and how they fall in love with each other. Have a try. After reading the above course, make your opening chapters more intriguing by adding 2 or 3 conflicts. When you design these conflicts, remember to review what you've learned in the previous courses. Be sure to integrate each character's disposition into every conflict and ensure that they are congruent with the scenarios that you've previously created. Be mindful of the source, process, and type of conflict you are designing, so that your story's extraordinary charm can come shining through. And I invite you to share your opening chapters in the comments section and get your writing points. Here are the notes for you. I hope you enjoy this course. Thank you.